Hi, everybody. This is Sheldon with a full and honest review of the movie Elvis, starring Austin Butler as Elvis and directed by Baz Luhrmann. Now, for those of you who know me, know that I'm a huge Elvis fan. I've been an Elvis fan since I was, I'm going to say about 7 years old. So I pretty much know a lot about Elvis. Now, obviously, not everything, but a lot. Now, I went to go see this movie with low expectations. Now, that's only because I've seen very bad interpretations of Elvis, like Kurt Russell, Don Johnson, and yes, even Val Kilmer. So, first, I'm going to start off with what they got right. Now, first of all, Austin Butler, he did an amazing job portraying Elvis. He captured the spirit, the essence, and even the mannerisms of Elvis. So there was times when you would actually think that you were watching the real Elvis. And for me to say that, you know he has to be amazing because to me, there's only one Elvis Presley. Now you can tell in the movie that they did Austin Butler and the real Elvis with footage, but it was mostly like from the back or from the side where you really couldn't see Elvis's face. So now let's move on to Tom Hanks. Tom Hanks playing the Colonel Tom Parker. Now, first of all, disclaimer, I'm a big Tom Hanks fan. I think he's an excellent actor. What he did with Forrest Gump, Castaway, Saving Private Ryan, the list just goes on and on. Splash, Big, it just goes on and on. But in Elvis, there was some inconsistencies in his performance as Colonel Tom Parker. First off, obviously, Tom Hanks doesn't look like Colonel Tom Parker. He had a fake nose, a fake double chin. And also, in real life, if you were to ever see interviews with the real Tom Parker, he didn't have the accent that Tom Hanks has in the movie. Now, the Colonel was from the Netherlands, but he told everybody that he was born in West Virginia, I believe. So he tried to do he spoke from the Netherlands like a Netherland tongue, but trying to add a southern flair to it to make people believe he was from the South. Now, as you know, the colonel's real name was Andreas Cornelius van Kujic, and he was in this country illegally. And that's one of the reasons why Elvis never did a tour or a concert outside of the United States, because the colonel knew he can leave the United States. But coming back, they would have found out that he was illegal and they would have deported him. That's why Elvis never played outside of the United States. Now, I'm going to go through some bullet points because I really don't want to bore you with this review. So I want to go through some bullet points of stuff that never happened that was in the movie. For example, Parker never told Elvis to tame it down as was portrayed in the movie. That some government officials told Parker that if he didn't tame Elvis, that Elvis was gonna go to jail, and it was insinuated that Parker was gonna get deported or at least be outed as an illegal alien. That never happened. See, Parker was all about the money. So obviously, the more that Elvis wiggled and got known and had notoriety and people wanted to see their show, and the more they talked about Elvis, the more the money came. And the colonel was all about the money. In the movie, it portrays him doing merchandising, such as I Love Elvis, and yes, it's true that he also had I Hate Elvis, because the colonel said, if you're going to mention Elvis's name, they wanted to get paid. So he covered his butt from both ends. Pretty smart. Now, another thing that never happened was Parker and Elvis never made a deal on top of a Ferris wheel. That never happened. Elvis and Colonel Tom Parker went into a partnership at the offices of the Colonel. That's where it happened. And also, another thing was that they show a scene of Elvis in concert at Russwood Park, which was on July 4th, 1956. Now, in the movie, Elvis starts the concert off with the song Trouble. You know, the one that goes, if you're looking for trouble, you came to the right place. But the only bad thing about that is that he couldn't have done that because the song wasn't written until 1958 for the movie King Creole. So in 56, that song didn't exist. He actually started that concert with Heartbreak Hotel. Now, also, in the movie, it depicts a riot that everybody goes crazy and Elvis has to be taken off the stage. That never happened. What the only thing that happened that came close to a riot was in 1955 in Jacksonville, Florida, at the Gator Bowl. And when I say riot, it was basically just girls running after his car. So that was basically it. Now, another timeline inconsistency. There's a scene of Elvis in the Army with Priscilla in 1959. And they're listening to the song, Can't Help Falling in Love. Now, we all know that the song Can't Help Falling in Love was written for the movie Blue Hawaii in 1961. That movie came out. So there's no way in the world they could be listening to that song in Germany in 59. The song didn't exist. So that never happened. Also, another thing that depicts in the movie was that the notion that the director of the 68 comeback special and Elvis were in cahoots to trying to fool the Colonel into thinking that they were actually going to do a Christmas special, and at the end do a switcheroo and have like Christmas scenes and people walking around in Christmas sweaters to try to trick the Colonel. That never happened. The Colonel knew every single song that was going to be played in the 68 special that was going to be sung. And also, he knew everything that was going to happen. Now, if you remember, or if you know, the 68 comeback special was filmed between June 27th and June 29th. And the Colonel had signed off on the special in May, a month earlier. Also, speaking of the 68 comeback special, a thing that they show in the movie is the assassination of Robert F. Kennedy. And it depicts in the movie that that assassination, that shooting, stopped production of the 68 comeback special, that everybody stopped what they were doing and they gathered around a TV. That never happened. And the reason why is because Robert F. Kennedy was shot on June 5th. And like I said before, the special was filmed June 27th to June 29th. Now, post-production of the movie, pre-production of the 68 comeback special was interrupted, but not the actual filming of the special. That was never interrupted. Another thing that they show in the movie is that Elvis fired the Colonel in the middle of a Las Vegas show on the microphone. That never happened. The only time Elvis went off script in concert was he ranted about a kitchen worker that he was friends with that got fired for no good reason. That was really the only time. The only time the Colonel ever said anything about Elvis's performance was when the drugs, the prescription pills, started to affect his performance. That's when the Colonel got pissed off because it started to, do effect on his money. Now, one thing that I was absolutely shocked and surprised about that they didn't mention in the movie, after all, this movie is the relationship between Elvis and the Colonel, something they didn't even mention was that in January of '73, Colonel Tom Parker signed all royalties and ownership of all Elvis Presley songs prior to 1973. He sold them back to RCA for $3 million. Now, I'm talking about songs like Heartbreak Hotel, Jailhouse Rock, Don't Be Cruel, Love Me Tender, really all of Elvis's biggest hits. He sold back to RCA for $3 million. He took 50% and he gave Elvis the other 50%. I mean, can you imagine how much that catalog is worth nowadays? It has to be in the millions. Now, yes, the drugs and Dr. Nick really didn't help Elvis out a lot. Dr. Nick never said no to Elvis. So whatever Elvis wanted, Elvis got. And you got to remember, this was pre-Betty Ford Clinic days. So Elvis didn't have a lot of options. So, yeah, I mean, you can say Elvis was, how would you say, depressed maybe around that time, like toward the end of his life. But also those silly movies. I mean, he was singing Old MacDonald Had a Farm in I think it was Paradise Hawaiian style. I mean, the king of rock and roll. They were silly movies, and it had the same formula. And he was making 3 films a year, which is unheard of, really. They were just making them and making them and making them. But Elvis, in the 60s, really stayed away. He was detached of what was going on around him. You got to remember, the Vietnam War was going around. The Beatles were taking over, the Rolling Stones, the British invasion. I mean, all this stuff was going on. So, just to wrap it up, to me, Elvis is the greatest entertainer that has ever lived. I mean, if you were to look at his life, he was absolutely dirt poor. I mean, they were so poor they lived in the projects, and they shared one bathroom with 7 families. I mean, this guy was, he didn't come from money. He was really poor. To grow up and become the greatest entertainer that ever lived. I mean, he changed music. He opened the doors for so many people. Who else can you say? He's been dead 40-something years, 45, I believe, if my math is correct, 45 years. And they still listen to his music, and they still go to Graceland, and they still buy Elvis merchandise. And he's still remembered. I mean, to me, that's amazing. Not too many people can do that or say that. So, to put a bow on it, if you're an Elvis fan, definitely go see the movie. You're not going to learn anything new about it, but I would give this movie an A for casting and a C for accuracy, because there was a lot of inconsistencies. Well, that's my review. I mean, let me know what you think. Let me know what you think of the movie. Let me know if I'm right. Let me know if I'm wrong. But either way, we'll see each other soon. Peace.